We're continuing our conversation on our zero DTE Gex flow tool. If you saw our last video, this helps us to identify where option dealers are going to be the most active on an intraday basis. We track each of the strike prices that are relevant for every ticker, whether it's zero DTE for SPX, SPY, or the Qs, or if it's weekly expirations for other mega cap stocks. The 5,500 strike has been in focus for most of the day for the SPX. The largest gamma exposure concentration is at this 5,500 level. Also, another interesting thing to note regarding the historical gamma exposure data, over the last 3 weeks or so, there's really been this uptrend in gamma exposure, meaning that over time, gamma exposure has been increasing from basically the zero level to around 2 billion, which is quite high for the SPX. So it's a buy the dip environment. And this has been the case. You can see like each of these dips, buyers stepped in each step of the way, forming a nice trend line. This is what positive gamma exposure environments tell us. And obviously, that's been the case for the last 3 weeks or so.
Yeah, and Anthony, we also pointed out when we've seen the gamma reach extremes, which lately it seems like the last three short-term tops we had were over 2 billion in SPX gamma exposure, and that typically led to some consolidation. I just wanted to point out to our viewers that we do watch for the extremes to signal getting potentially close to reversals sometimes.
So far today, we haven't seen any major acceleration in the zero DTE Gex flow. The 549 on the SPY has been the main strike that's been in focus. But you can see all the relevant strikes that we're tracking here today are pretty much just trading flat. If we look back at earlier in the week, this is from Monday the 17th around noon Eastern. The 545 strike had been in focus. We were watching that. You can see a big ramp up here in the 11 o'clock hour. We were watching that trading below 544 at the time. And if we just fast forward here about an hour, and this is the power of this indicator, we see price had blown through that 545 level. And we noticed, if you just look here at the highlight here, the green line, which was the 547 strike, was now ramping up. Look at this acceleration here. You can see on that 547 strike. And so this is just kind of giving us advance notice that that is the focus, the next target for option dealers. And so these levels are really important. As the day progresses, we can track this and sort of get a little bit of an advance notice as to what strike prices are going to be important for option dealers in particular. And if we come over here to the 17th, the high of the day was 548.53. So the zero DTE Gex flow was pointing higher each step of the way in advance, letting us know that higher prices were coming. That's the power of this indicator.
This morning, I mentioned Nvidia as one of the tickers that I've been watching. Nvidia having hit that 140, which actually the Gex chart had advertised as a strongly favorable target all week.
Yeah, if you look over here at the weekly Gex flow, this morning we started out with the 140 strike as kind of the largest positive gamma exposure. And this is a weekly look where we're just considering option contracts that expire this Friday. So when we're looking at that, we can see the gamma exposure picture shifts slightly, but still the 140 strike is the one that was in focus. This is classic gamma exposure behavior. We're in an extremely positive gamma exposure environment on Nvidia. So option dealers above this 140 level are essentially selling as price moves higher above 140. We didn't have long, of course, at the open this morning. This was probably a combination of both profit taking and option dealers selling in order to hedge their positions. And so this combination is when a lot of times we'll see these retracements off of these dealer cluster zones. Another name we were watching this past week in our Discord community, several of our members were trading SMCI. You can see some insane moves here over the last week in SMCI, basically going from below 850 all the way up to the 1,000 strike. Really, 17, 20% move in just a matter of days. Obviously, SMCI has a lot of volatility, but the gamma exposure concentrations at the 900 strike, the 950, and the 1000 strike were all pointing the way. And so we had some huge profits from some of our members trading off of this data. Similar picture in SMCI when we consider the weekly gamma exposure flow. We opened up this morning. Obviously, the 1000 strike was the largest positive gamma concentration. Dealers began selling at the open, and we could see just a steady downward move in the gamma exposure weekly Gex flow. We'll see how this shakes out tomorrow. We still got one more day. Tomorrow's also options expiration for the month of June. Sean, I know you've been paying attention to OPEX lately. Is there anything you can say unusual or something should be paying attention to today and into tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow is the biggest OPEX in history, supposedly. 5.1 trillion in notional exposure expiring, and 2.9 of that, so more than half of that gamma, expires with the SPX options in the morning. We've mentioned volatility is really low. The VIX has been actually elevated the last day or so, but overall it's still fairly low.
Yeah, and we've been mostly above 1 billion. Here's a 1 billion level. We have been mostly above 1 billion going back to basically since the first week of June. So we have been in this, higher positive gamma trending upward environment. This is not something you have to wait to see the trend in the actual stock or in the indice, but you can actually see this ahead of time using gamma exposure. So way back when, June 3rd, let's see when this is, we basically crossed over here on June 5th. We got into very high positive gamma exposure. And ever since then, the buy the dip environment has been in place. So this is going on now for over 2 weeks. And, we've caught a lot of that move over the last couple of weeks and a lot of the plays we've been doing because we've been able to track that historical gamma exposure trend over time. So all of these tools are meant to be used in conjunction with each other as well as other analysis on top of that. There's no one data point that's going to give you all the answers. It's really better to get a number of different data points and put them all together to formulate your strategy. That's what we do every day in our Discord. We've got a really strong community of beginner and experienced traders. We share a lot of information, a lot of data. It's a really great community. You guys should definitely check that out when you get a chance. I'll put a link in the description below. Also, if you're interested in accessing these tools, in particular, our gamma exposure dashboard, our zero DTE Gex flow, and a number of other tools that we have available, head over to geeksoffinance.com and check that out. I think you guys would really like that a lot. Check it out. Let us know if you have any questions down in the comments, and we will see you guys in the next video.